Morning, everyone. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Jordan, for that introduction. And thank you to Equus Law for hosting this and to all the sponsors for supporting it. It's only through their support that something like this can happen. I think we live in a pretty cool area. I think that the fact that this is happening, this doesn't just happen across the country, right? There's a small community, and the fact that we're gathering to learn from one another, talk about growth, that's pretty cool to me. So I'm going to be talking this morning about Previa's growth journey. And before I do that, I want to ask you a question, simple question, but I want you to think about 2023. You're at the end of 2023, and think of a metric that you use to measure your growth. Maybe it's revenue, maybe it's profit, maybe it's the number of employees you have, maybe it's, if you're an organization, maybe it's the number of people that you impact. But the end of 2023 happens, and you hit a number that you're really, really happy with. You're thrilled with that number. Okay, now think about going beyond that by 20%. So you had a fantastic year. What do you do? Anybody, what do you do? If you just blow it out of the water? Celebrate? I would think you'd celebrate, right? I have to believe you're at a conference. Many of you paid to be at a conference called Grow, Accelerate, Propel. And so I have to believe that all of you believe that growth is good, and that it's right, and that it's a sign of an organization that's thriving and flourishing, and that you would celebrate that growth, right? But I also believe that that's not necessarily the case for everybody in your circle. In fact, there's probably some people in your organization that don't look at growth quite the same way that you do. They may resist it. They may even resent it. I know for Previa, so we have a monthly meeting with all of our employees. And during that meeting, we announced what our prior month's growth year over year was. And in an exceptional month, our vice president of sales in particular would give a woohoo when he hears that number. And there's been a couple meetings that people usually from the production floor that have come up to me and they've said, you know, Brian, how you celebrate that growth. What that growth means to me is I got to work harder. I got longer hours. I got more work to do. I'm not quite as thrilled as you are. In fact, I had somebody come up to me a couple years ago and they said, can we just take a break from this growth? Can we flatline for a year or two? So the question is growth important? And if so, why? Why is it important? And I thought, hey, we're on this stage kind of in a barn-like thing, and I'm just going to use some examples from the farm. And if you, for instance, planted some seed and you threw it out into the field, and that seed, it's not advancing, folks. There we go. That seed did not produce the crop, didn't produce the food that you wanted it to produce. You'd probably throw the seed away. You'd probably trample on it. There was either something wrong with the seed or something wrong with the environment that it was put in, right? Much the same way if you bought a calf and you fed the calf and you watered the calf, maybe even massaged it every once in a while, and it didn't turn into the cow that you wanted it to turn into, you'd be disappointed, would you not? See, I believe God instills in creation all around us the desire to grow and examples of growth, and that He gives us those examples so that we can learn from them. Let's talk about family. This is my mom and dad. This is over 60 years ago. They've been married for over 60 years now. I'm not quite sure why they weren't smiling on their wedding day, but nevertheless, they had a desire to grow their family. They had 4 sons. I'm the youngest of 4 sons, and this is that family now. So this is 60 years after they got married, they were at the wedding of their youngest grandson. They had a desire to grow. Even couples who get together and marry and decide not to have children or can't have children, they still have a desire to grow their relationship. It's all around us. Growth examples are all around us. Right now we're studying on Wednesday nights at our church, my faith growth story, okay? So it's all around us. I also asked our marketing team, I said, give me a picture then that would represent kind of the opposite. Kind of something that's not growing, and I thought maybe they'd give me a picture of the Cleveland Browns defense. But instead they sent this. So you never know what's going to come out of a marketing group. You just don't. And I told him it's been nice working with him. So, all right, I'll get that off the screen. There we go. So back to business. Today I'm going to reference 5 books. And these books have been kind of instrumental to me in my own growth story and the story of Previa. The first such book is called Right Away and All at Once by Greg Brenneman. Don't know if any of you have read it or not, but in particular, I think this book would resonate well with this audience. And that's because Greg grew up in Heston, Kansas, in a Mennonite family. He went to Harvard and graduated from Harvard. He went to Bain Capital, where he worked with Mitt Romney. And in his 30s, he was tapped to do a turnaround at Continental Airlines. And he was wildly successful there. And after that, he was asked to do a turnaround at Burger King. And he was wildly successful there. And now he's a principal at CCMP, which is a private equity group in Houston. And so he's done this time and time and time again. And this book is about the lessons that he's learned from those turnarounds. It's not just about turnarounds, though. You can learn much more than just about how to turn a business. You can also learn about how to take a good business to a great business. The subtitle of the book is 5 Steps to Transform Your Business and Enrich Your Life. And that enrich your life part was what was almost as valuable to me as the business part. Because I mentioned that he grew up as a Mennonite, so he talks about integrating faith into work. He talks about prioritizing family. He talks about developing a giving plan. There's much more to this book than just turnaround businesses. And so it's a good, practical book that I think you'd enjoy reading. He has a section called Think Money In, Not Money Out. And in that section, the whole gist of it is many managers who want to improve their company focus on taking cost out of the system. And their approach at CCMP has been, includes that, but it's really been focusing on growing revenue. He says it like this: growing revenue always produces better results than focusing solely on cutting costs. So yes, managing your cost is important, but if you want to increase profitability in a big way, you must focus on generating revenue. He goes on to ask this question: why the obsession with growth? Well, for one thing, it's a lot of fun to create jobs and new opportunities for so many people. Creating good jobs is really our primary mission as business people. I want you to think about that. That's a strong sentence. Creating good jobs is really our primary mission as business people. That's a strong sentence. Do you believe it? I'll tell you, Previa is closing in on 2,000 employees. And one of the true blessings in my life has been to watch us grow and to be able to offer people jobs, to give people the wherewithal to make a living, and to put food on their table. That's been one of the greatest joys in my life. And so it resonates well with me when Greg says that. Many of you know that Dan Oalabi and I are the co-founders of Branches Worldwide, and the same concept is true there. So our whole gist is to find leaders across the world, pour into them, partner them with mentors, bring them into a community where they can learn. We teach them every month. We visit them. And our hope is that as they grow their businesses, they hire people from their community. We believe that that can transform communities. Lastly, Greg references a concept from a popular book in this quote. He says, research shows that by focusing on growth, you can create a mighty flywheel effect that quickly sparks a positive spiral. Profitable companies offer better promotion opportunities and attract better employees. Happy employees offer better customer service. Better customer service makes customers want to return. Those customers tell their friends to come, which increases your profits and makes for happy investors. And the flywheel just keeps gaining more and more momentum. At the end of my presentation, I'm going to come back to this whole flywheel idea. But the takeaway for now is that growth is important, and it's important for those reasons. So I want you to think about your organization. And even if you're not hearing it from employees, be mindful of the fact that there are probably some people within your company that don't think about growth the same way you do. Bring them along. Talk to them about the why. Why is growth important? So bring them along on that journey. April 14th, 2006 was the first day that I met Bill Mullett, the founder of Previa. And up until that time, I was working for 17 years here in Berlin at Owens, Illinois. That's what it was known by back then. And I was leading the plant here as plant manager. I was also been asked to be a part of 2 global improvement teams. And so my travel schedule was crazy, and I wasn't at home a whole lot. I remember the very spot on the Ohio Turnpike. I was traveling home from Toledo. The headquarters were in Toledo, Ohio. And I was driving home, and God gave me a nudge, and he said, I have a new chapter for you. It's coming up. And I got home, and I told Brenda, my wife, I said, listen, our daughters are 6 and 10 years old. I am not missing their childhood. I'm not missing out on that. I want to start networking. So I called a friend, and I said, would you be interested in starting a consulting business with me? He thought about it. A couple days later, called me back, and he said, Brian, I'm really not at a point where I can do that. But I want to introduce you to 3 friends of mine. One of those friends was Bill Mullett. So Bill and I find ourselves on April 14th, 2006, sitting in his office. The rest of the plant is quiet because it's Good Friday. And he agreed to meet me on Good Friday. And so we meet, we really hit it off. Conversation goes great. And over the course of the rest of that summer, we met a few more times. And the next to last time, he says, you know what, we've met several times now. He said, you understand our challenges as a company. You understand the opportunities that might be there. I want to hire you, but I just don't have a position for you. So here's what I want you to do. In Bill Mullett fashion, he says, I want you to go out and I want you to write your job description and bring it back to me. I want you to write what you want to do for our company. And I did that, and on September 25th, 2006, I was hired at Previa. What a journey it's been. Late in 2009, he promoted me to president, and in 2016, when he retired, I became CEO. Since then, we have been on a real roll. We have seen growth in so many areas. Growth in our team, I said before, from 300 employees at that time to around 1,900 now. Growth in our brand awareness. We grew our territory. We're coast to coast. 10 times the revenues that we had back in 2006. It just goes on and on. It's not because of me, and it's not because of any one person at Previa. It's because of the solid foundation that Bill had created. Bill would say it like this. He'd say, I'm not the smartest guy, but I know how to hire smarter people than me to work around me. And I would agree with him. I wouldn't agree that he's not the smartest guy. So don't tell him that I said that. But wow, what a team. It took me all of 5 minutes to realize the special team that we had at Previa when I was hired on. And we had to move a few around. We even had to stop at a bus stop or two and let a few off the bus. But it was a solid foundation on which we could build. And we also recognized that it could just go to a whole new level. And so that's what we've been working on these past 16 years. And as I look back over those 16 years, there's a lot of things that play a part of why we grew so fast and how we grew so fast. 3 kind of rose to the top. And so I want to talk about those 3 this morning. I call them 3 essentials. So the first essential is purpose. Mark Twain said the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And I believe that. Our purpose transcends all else. Our values come from our purpose. Our attitudes and actions and words come from our purpose. In 2012, Previa had kind of a pivotal moment related to their purpose. So up to that point, I would say that all the employees at Previa kind of knew what was in Bill's heart. He knew what was important to the Mullett family. But there was nothing that was formalized, nothing that was on paper. There were some quotes that were thrown around, but nothing that we could say, this is our purpose. And so we went to work as a leadership team, and we said, let's identify our purpose, our vision, our mission, and our values. It's important that we do that. And the first one that we decided to work on was purpose. We ask ourselves this question to help define it. Why do we exist? Why does Previa exist? and answering that question, we would arrive at our purpose. So, this is our purpose. You can see it on the right. To let our light shine before others so they may see our good works and give glory to our Father who is in heaven. That's what we decided Previa's purpose is, why we exist. On the left, you can see our roadmap. And the roadmap is all four of those: purpose, vision, mission, and values. And I will say that this is used extensively. It's not just something that we plop up on a wall or on a banner, but it's used extensively. If you're a candidate for hire at Previa, you'd probably hear it during your interview. Once you're hired, you'd hear it certainly during your onboarding. And then on a monthly basis, you hear it as we share with all of our employees our purpose, vision, mission, and values. The next book I wanted to reference was The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. And probably the most intriguing, most impactful part of this book is literally the first sentence, the first four words, where Rick says, "It's not about you." So he's got a whole book about figuring out your purpose and a purpose-driven life, and he starts it by saying, "It's not about you." How intriguing is that? Bruce Hampshire had a quote as well that I have now on a coaster on my desk that I see every day. And that coaster says, "The more it's not about you, the more you'll love what you do." I believe that, really do. So purpose, so important in understanding what your purpose is as an individual and understanding what your purpose is as an organization. So many leaders, they have the position, they have the power, they have the people, they have the privileges, they have the paycheck, but they don't have peace because they don't know their purpose. And that's something that is so important that you figure out as an individual and as a company. The next essential I want to talk about is influence. If asked to define leadership using just one word, most thought leaders would say influence. And the power of this word, the power of influence, is built right into the word itself. One more. There you go. In fact, influence and influenza come from the same root that means to flow into. We as leaders are all contagious. Now, I said that about a year and a half ago, and everybody said this is not the time to say that we're all contagious. But we are all contagious. The people around you will catch your words, your actions, and your attitudes. You believe that? The people will also catch the words, actions, and attitudes of other leaders within your company. And so we're going to have a positive or a negative effect and influence on the people that we're around, especially if you have a leadership position every day. So we got to throw away the negative and multiply the positive. When people ask me what keeps me up at night, this is the first thing I usually say, is that I shouldn't say worry. I dwell on the fact as to whether or not each and every employee at Previa is being led well. That they feel cared for, that they feel served, that they feel loved, that obstacles are removed for them, that they're provided with the resources that they need, and that they feel that they're in a safe working environment. And by safe, I don't just mean physically safe. I mean that they don't feel harassed or intimidated or bullied by anyone. That's what keeps me up at night. We want our culture to be one of community and our morale to be out of this world. And the only way to give employees that is to make sure that they are being led by leaders that love them, care about them, and serve them. And that might sound like a heavy load on our leaders, but I believe that's what we've signed up for as leaders of Previa. There's a book called Lead for God's Sake by Todd Gongwer. And this is kind of written as a parable for finding the heart of leadership. It's about a basketball coach, and he's having some struggles. And so he looks for answers, and he finds some answers from kind of unconventional sources. As Coach Rocker is teaching his team about responsibility, he says this, and this fits right in with influence. He says, "Make no mistake, as a leader on this team, you're heavily responsible for your influence on the actions and attitudes of your teammates through what you've modeled. So as a leader, you must always step up to the plate and take full responsibility for your contribution to problems that arise as a result of that influence." That's heavy stuff, but it's true, and it's true at work as well. There's a lot of people out there right now who are teaching us that we have the right to skirt our responsibility, right? Politicians blaming politicians, executives blaming workers, workers blaming executives, teachers blaming parents, parents blaming teachers. We're teaching people to skirt their responsibility. And I would say, friends, go in the opposite direction. Take on more responsibility for the responsibility that you have as a leader. The people that you influence, that you interact with, you will influence positively or negatively. So my second recommendation to you is to assess whether your positional leaders are in fact your true leaders. Are they influencing the team? And if they are, is the influence what you want it to be? If you have a leader in place, and you might even be thinking of somebody right now, and you think to yourself, I know they're toxic, I just haven't dealt with the situation. If you want growth, you have to deal with the situation, because they are impacting the morale of your workforce. The last essential I want to talk about is excellence. Bigger does not mean better, but better is the way to get bigger. And there's a book called Excellence Wins by Horst Schulze, a no-nonsense guide to becoming the best in a world of compromise. This is my favorite business book of all time. I love reading this book. Horst was a co-founder and a past president of the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain. And in it, he explains what it meant to be developing that Ritz-Carlton chain. If you ever stayed at a Ritz-Carlton, it's a fascinating experience. And when you read this book and then stay at a Ritz-Carlton, you can still see Horst's fingerprints all over it. Why it was important for him to be excellent. Refuse to be mediocre is really the essence of the book. So where do you see excellence in your organization? That's great when you see excellence. You know every time you do something, you hit it out of the park. You're excellent at it. And then we all know there's places where we're not so excellent. Where we are and where we know we can be, there's a gap. And it's our responsibility as leaders to close that gap. I want to talk a little bit about the power of subtleties. And I'll use my hearing as an example. So when I have poor hearing. Worn hearing aids for 10 years now, and when I look at my hearing test from when I was 35 to when I was 45 and now to when I'm 55, I see a steep decline in my ability to hear. But if you were to ask me from one day to the next during that same 20 years, how's your hearing? Fine. How's your hearing? Fine. I can hear today just like I heard yesterday. Well, obviously that wasn't the case. It was the subtlety of losing that hearing that was dangerous. It was the subtlety, day after day after day, until one day a customer calls and says, "What's going on, guys? Your quality's not near what it used to be." Right? That's happened to us. And it wakes you up. So the whole takeaway in all of that is measure what you want to manage and respond when that trend is being negatively impacted. Respond quickly. Respond to get that turning the other way, or else the subtlety of the whole situation might drive you to a level of quality or service, whatever you're measuring, that you don't like. The opposite is true. You may not be able to cut your quality defects in half in a month or a year, but what about 3 years? We oftentimes overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And so it works just the same way. Small incremental improvements gain, and that subtlety works to your benefit in that situation. Growth doesn't come without risk. We've all heard of companies who have been told, Previa is one of them, by our customers, you're growing too fast. It's out of control. And there's risk in growing. And so we use two phrases to help kind of keep our mindset where it needs to be. The first one is always content, never satisfied. And those two things might seem to conflict with one another, but I don't believe they do. And in fact, I think they're both scriptural. Being always content where we find ourselves today, but never satisfied with what that means about tomorrow. The second thing that we say to one another and remind ourselves often is that we need to shrink as we grow. We need to shrink as we grow. And what that means as it relates to employees is we want to always make sure that we have, that we're building new leaders that are in the bullpen and ready to go so that when we add employees, we can also add leaders so that leaders have the right number of people to lead. And depending on what they're leading, what kind of group they're leading, it makes a difference. So if they're a production supervisor, they can, lead effectively a certain number of people. But if they're a sales leader, it's a different number. But we want to make sure that we shrink as we grow because that connectedness of our employees to Previa is important. The same is true with our customers. 15 years ago, we had 15 account managers. That's what we call our salesmen. Today, we have 70. So as we added customers, as our sales grew, we knew that we had to add account managers. Our account managers 15 years ago were told that they needed to be on a 4 to 5 week schedule and visiting all their customers. Every 4 to 5 weeks, they were supposed to meet every customer and take of something of value to that customer. 15 years later, it's the same rules apply. So we had to build out our sales team so that we shrunk as we grew and our customers didn't feel that we were getting too big. It's difficult, but it's something that's very important. We kind of look at it and say it's the same model that a church would use. A church of 200 people, there's a connectedness from all the parishioners to the pastor. He could have everybody over for dinner once a year, right? There's a connectedness there. When that same church grows to 2,000 people, that's impossible for it to happen. So what has to happen in order for those people to stay connected? There has to be small groups, Bible studies, Sunday school, different ways that they can interact and stay connected to the church. So, purpose, influence, excellence. The three essentials that have really been directly responsible for Previa's growth. Even though growth itself wasn't the impetus for these things. Okay, we didn't say we want to concentrate on purpose, influence, and excellence so that we can grow. We did it because we felt like that's what we were supposed to do, and it was the right thing to do. I will say, if you look at that, there's the acronym, PIE, PI. Maybe it's easy to remember. I didn't even try that. Wow. And I don't believe it's because this is easy as pie, because this is hard stuff. There's a lot of work involved in this. So I like to believe that it's when you get these three right, it's really sweet. And so that's the pie that I'd like to remember this by. I want to return to a concept that I mentioned briefly earlier in my presentation, and that's the concept of a flywheel. So the last book that I'll reference here is Jim Collins' Good to Great. It's an older book, still a very good book and a lot to learn from it. And in Good to Great, Jim talks about this flywheel concept. In a machine, a flywheel is something that kind of returns energy to the system and so forth. But in business, a flywheel is continuous improvements that deliver results. And you'll see that it creates momentum. There's 5 components of a great flywheel. The first component is the essence is momentum. It's all about momentum in a flywheel. The second component is that the top, the starting point, is something that's essential about us. Like if you would say this, they would say, oh yeah, that's Berlin Gardens through and through. It's something essential. They're known for it. Third, it talks about the sides of the flywheel. So the right side is how we improve people's lives, and the left side is the fuel that generates the power. Fourth is that it's an empirical validation, which is a simple way of saying, I've seen it work. I've seen it work. Okay? And lastly, it's an architecture. And what that means is it's not so specific that it talks about products or customers, but it's an architecture that you can lay over different products and customers. So if it works for entry doors, it'll work for windows. And if it works for windows, it'll work for stone and so forth. So it's an architecture. It's at a higher level. So just imagine with me for a while that there's this flywheel, and it's 10 feet tall and 2 feet wide, huge circumference, made of solid metal, okay? And I go up to this flywheel, and I put everything I have to get it to move. And I might get it to move a couple inches. And then I ask some of you, come on up here and help me. Jordan, come on out here and help me. Come on up here. And we push it together. And we get that thing, and finally, it's got our full rotation. And we push a little bit more. We get more energy into it, get more fuel into it, and it's starting to roll. And we just keep pushing. And we keep pushing. We add the fuel. We add the fuel. We add the fuel. Now it's rotating so fast that we could even take our hands off of it for at least a couple rotations, and the momentum would just keep carrying it. But then we're right back to it, and we're adding the fuel, and we're adding the fuel, and adding the fuel. And pretty soon it's scary fast. It's scary fast. It would be nonsense to go up and try to stop that thing. It'd be dangerous to try to stop it. That's the idea of a flywheel. I mentioned Previa has created our roadmap, our purpose, vision, mission, and values. And so this year, the challenge was, let's go deeper. Let's become more self-aware. And one of the things we focused on was our flywheel. And so I want to share with you what we've determined to be Previa's flywheel. Okay? Again, it starts at the top, and we believe that it's our generous investment in cultivating a purpose-driven culture. Now, if you think of the PIE, right? Purpose, influence, and excellence. It's embedded into that. Generous investment in cultivating a purpose-driven culture. We believe that that purpose-driven culture leads to engaged employees who serve and care. And those engaged employees who serve and care create solutions, great solutions. Professional class solutions that meet or exceed our expectations. And those professional class solutions that meet or exceed expectations lead to thriving customer relationships built on trust and respect. And those relationships lead to an ascending brand of choice and expanding demand. And that expanding demand generates the revenue that allows us to generously invest in cultivating a purpose-driven culture. And that culture creates engaged employees who serve and care, and so forth and so on. And before you know it, it's got so much momentum, it's hard to stop. That's Previa's flywheel. I'd encourage you to do that and to define your flywheel. So as a quick recap, be aware of those team members who may not be where you're at as it relates to growth. Bring them along and talk to them about the why. Focus on the 3 essentials: purpose, influence, and excellence. And lastly, go deeper and try to define your own flywheel. What's important to you, and how are you creating the momentum within your company in order to grow? Thanks for listening. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and hope that you're blessed beyond measure in the coming year on your own journey of growth. Thank you.